Welcome to the Orange Partnership for Alcohol and Drug-Free Youth podcast. The goal of our podcast is to provide a platform where Orange Partnership's greater community of stakeholders can get informed and take action by helping us achieve our mission of preventing the early onset of alcohol and drug use in our youth. My name is Bria Wilson, Program Specialist at Orange Partnership. In today's episode, which I'm referring to as the Leadership Meet and Greet podcast, we'd like to introduce you to two very important leaders at Orange Partnership. Gyana Chambless, Director of Orange Partnership, and Keith Bagby, Board Chair. Gayane, let's start with you. Every organization needs a dedicated director at the helm. You've been working in Orange Partnership for 13 years now, 7 of those years in the capacity of Program Director. Before we dive into details about your history, can you take us a step back and explain for all the listeners out there, what is a community coalition?
Great question, Bria. So when we think about coalitions, we often hear them in terms of political settings, but actually a coalition is really a group of diverse organizations, agencies, and community members who come together with a shared goal, a vision, a mission, and they join their resources together. So that could be people resources, it could be material resources to help further that vision, to make a collective impact. And I will say that when we first started, we started with just a handful of people. I think there were 4 or 5 people at the table. And today our coalition, which is known as Orange Partnership, is joined with 30 different represented agencies, organizations, community members who are all working together for what we have established as that shared vision.
Very cool. Thank you for filling us in. A lot of partners and a lot of collaboration to all work together to bring our mission to light. If you can go back and let us know, how did the coalition actually begin and why? What was the why behind the beginning?
Another great question. It actually began just as an ad hoc committee in 2008, and it was born out of the Orange County Board of Health Community Health Assessment that found that underage drinking was an issue, not just in regards to the town and gown setting in Chapel Hill and Carrboro, but in the rural part of the county. And because the dynamics were a little different in the rural part than in the Chapel Hill Carrboro area, we needed to look at strategies that would be more effective in the rural part than downtown. I mean, it's a whole different setting and population. So that initial grassroots effort began as advocates for adolescents. And then in 2011, we received our first federal funding through the Drug-Free Community Grant. And it started out as underage drinking, but at that time we also realized that more and more youth were misusing prescription medication. So how do we address that? So those were our early beginnings, and in 2011 is when we were formed officially as a coalition, not just a grassroots initiative of the health department.
Thank you for that history. Understanding a coalition and how it operates a little bit better now, I think it's very impactful. You're really looking at addressing what issues are happening in the community with youth specifically, and bringing in all your partners to address those issues. Very good cause. So you gave us a little bit about the history of how the coalition started. Tell us some things about what the coalition has accomplished. What are the biggest accomplishments to you as the director?
Ooh, there's so much that the coalition has done. And again, it's been a growth effort starting, as I mentioned, in 2011. And while we were looking at addressing underage drinking, that perspective was twofold. One was that the perception among our youth was that the majority of high schoolers were using alcohol, getting together for parties in the fields, the party barn idea. and also where they were getting it. So to address those two different things, we had two different strategies. One was through our youth empowerment program that looked at that perception of harm, but also the misinformation that the majority were, because from the data, youth risk behavior surveys, we knew that the majority were not. So messaging that positive, but at the same time where they were getting it. And at that time, most of our rural retailers were not checking ID when they were selling alcohol. And as a matter of fact, in the beginning, 2012, we found that only 35% of the stores were checking ID. Fast forward, at least right before COVID, I can tell you that the average favorable outcome rate based on our assessments was 96%. So we actually grew it significantly. So we became standard to verify age. So whenever listeners get checked for ID, thank that person because they're actually doing the work to protect our youth. The second thing was, as I mentioned, prescription drugs. And when the organization first started looking at it, they looked at three strategies. Where were youth getting medication to misuse, what the perception of harm was, and how could we reduce that access again. We found that there were no permanent drop sites when we began. So our first mission was to partner with our law enforcement agencies to have permanent disposal sites. Fast forward, we started with 3 through our grant funding. Now we have at least 9. It's become standard operating procedure. If you have medication, you no longer need to dispose of it. Then we also looked at what's in the home, and based on surveys, most people were not securing medication. I know myself, when my mother went into hospice, I looked for a medication lockbox to secure all that hospice type of medication, and there were no lockboxes to buy. So we actually started an initiative and again partnered with the health department, with the dental clinic, because dentists were the #1 prescribing doctors of opioids. This is way before the opioid epidemic. And that was an instrumental pilot program for those dentists in the dental clinic to do patient education, and then also when prescribing, offer to provide a free lockbox. The campaign, we called it Lock Your Meds, actually was born in Orange County through the coalition and through our partners, and was later picked up by the state and became today's Lock Your Meds campaign, which has helped sustain that initial effort. So that continues to be sustained today. The other things that we have done more recently, I would say, is to start looking at the increase after years of decrease of youth use of tobacco. We have seen a drastic rise with nicotine use and also cannabis use, because marijuana has become much more socially acceptable, especially as we've seen both recreational and medical legislation. That has an impact on our youth. Of course, here in North Carolina, it is not legal medically or recreational. There are a number of things that might change. And our goal is just to protect the youth from early initiation, bottom line. So what does the coalition look to do around that? One of those things is we have realized coming out of the pandemic, many might be turning to using substances as a coping mechanism. So the coalition has really pivoted from the access, although that's still part of the picture, but really looking at addressing those supports if young people are feeling stressed, depressed, of being able to empower them to have better coping mechanisms, coping strategies, building protective factors, whether that be pro-social engagement, after-school opportunities, summer programs, all these protective measures so that kids can have a healthier option than turning to substance. And part of that is understanding how their brain is still developing, why it impacts them differently than an adult, but then also giving them the resources. So the coalition has embarked on a new program called Orange Resilience Initiative. This is through the health department again, in partnership with Alliance, of course, Orange Partnership being the coalition, and also Department of Social Services, to bring community resiliency to Orange County. And it's actually a program where people are trained in community resilience model through the Trauma Institute. So it is an evidence-based practice. I'm really excited about this initiative.
That is very exciting. And you brought up the youth empowerment focus of Orange Partnership, and we actually have one of our high school student interns in the audience with us. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I kind of know where you're going to go with this, but what are you most proud of at the coalition?
Well, we've done a lot, and it's not one person. We cannot operate in a silo. It is all the coalition members, again, working together with a shared vision in mission for that collective impact. And I will say that we've had so many initiatives in the past 10 years. We've actually successfully sustained 617 initiatives through these coalition partners and made 327 actual changes in our community in Orange County. And through the partners, we have served nearly 18,000 people over the course of the past 10 years that we know of. But what I'm most proud of is our youth empowerment program. Youth have always been my personal passion. And seeing their growth, I remember some of our middle school students, we teach them how to do public speaking, but we start one-on-one, just teaching them how to interview a person so that they're not in a big group, but just interviewing one-on-one. And we've had people who were very apprehensive and anxious about even interviewing one person they knew. And to see that growth, that they can then stand up in front of a crowd and talk and present. And I remember one student who we had, who her desire was to go to an out-of-state university. But her parents were really kind of wanting her to stay local because they were concerned about whether she would be okay going out of state because she had anxieties. And to see her grow over 3 years with a DAP program, to not only get accepted into this competitive out-of-state university, but her first year as a freshman, she studied abroad. And she has shared that it was because of what she experienced in ADAPT. And so I am super proud of our youth empowerment program because I see these young people who are developing into our future leaders and shakers and movers really developing those skills.
That's amazing. Thank you, Gayane, so much. We're so lucky to have you as our fearless leader. We thank you for your dedication to envisioning a healthy and thriving community for all of our youth. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Keith Bagby, Board Chair at Orange Partnership. Keith worked for over 30 years as a consultant with Blue Cross Blue Shield. He's now retired but remains a very active member in our community. Most importantly, Keith shares our coalition's passion for preventing risk factors leading to the early onset of substance use in our youth and is passionate about enhancing protective factors in the community. Keith, tell us, how did you get involved with Orange Partnership and why do you care so much about working with youth?
Well, it all started for me based on, believe it or not, alcohol. And you're probably saying, wait, what? Alcohol? Well, I was on the Orange County ABC board, and we did funding for Orange Partnership. So every year, the group from Orange Partnership, as well as other people, would come and present to us and ask us for funding. And that's how I found out about Orange Partnership. So I'm the type of person that I'm very hands-on. I always want to be involved. So I actually went to every organization that we were funding, and Orange Partnership was one of them. So I went to the first meeting, and there were a lot of people there. And so at that time, I was representing Orange County ABC Board. And so from there, being on that coalition for several years, I had the opportunity to move up, so to speak, and became a board member for Orange Partnership. From there, I'm now the board chair for Orange Partnership, and I'm loving that. Got activities just about every day right now, but loving every minute of it.
That's awesome. And youth is definitely a priority in your life. Tell us a little bit about how you help youth in your coaching and refereeing on the side.
Well, I guess as sort of a little side note, when I was a kid, elementary school, my father became a volunteer football coach. And we had no equipment and no place to play. So he went back to the high schools, got them to donate equipment for us to play football, and went to the local park, and we practiced there. And then we became a part of the YMCA. And so for several years, he was our coach prior to going to middle school and then to high school. And he never received a dime for it. So that was really, the history of the involvement with kids. I saw my father, who had a full-time job as a mail carrier, spend his time in the evenings with us, the young people. And so from there, when I became adult, living in Connecticut, I wanted to become a referee, but I didn't have any connections. So I went to a meeting that I thought I was going to be a referee, but I ended up being a site leader, and kids would come in the evenings and play basketball. And then as site leaders, on a voluntary basis, I had the opportunity of becoming a coach. And so that was the first time that I became a coach, a basketball coach in Hartford, Connecticut. And so when I relocated to Baltimore, Maryland, I had a friend that was going to a referees meeting, so I went along with him for the basketball referees meeting. I was 28 years old, and I'm not going to say my age now, but I'm a seasoned individual, and I've been refereeing basketball ever since then. So along the way, around 35 or so, I picked up football. So I'm also a referee for football. So just about every day, especially during my season, which starts in mid-August, I'm with kids. I'm either on the field with them or I'm in the gym with them. And in high school, we had 3 kids in my house. So my son, my daughter, and my son's best friend, because both his parents were deceased. So starting with the 9th grade, he came and lived with us. So I've always had involvement with kids, and that's my passion. I really enjoy that.
That's amazing, Keith. We'll be at events in the community, and kids that Keith has refereed in basketball, we'll point them out and come out and say hi. So the youth really look up to you and all of your mentorship in the community. If you can, I want to ask you what I asked Gayane, but what would you say that you're the most proud of the Orange Partnership Coalition and what it's accomplished? What stands out to you?
Yeah, so I guess consistent with what Gayane said, what really stands out to me, and this goes all the way back to the Orange County ABC Board, is the ADAPT program, which is dealing with the youth. And so that really inspires me working with the youth. And the way I look at it is you can have adult-to-child conversation, and then you can have a child-to-child conversation. And with the adult-to-child, the child sometimes will get to the point where they will tune you out. But if it's a child-to-child conversation, and especially towards your age group, then you want to listen to them because you can learn something. You can learn something from me also, but I'm probably going to give the type of information that they're not going to be excited about. But if somebody your age or younger, for example, says, you know what, that nicotine, that vaping, that's not the way to go because of this, and this, and that. So, that program, and I've been able to go to different presentations where the high schoolers are presenting to the middle schoolers. And those programs remind me of Let's Make a Deal, because the middle schoolers are sitting there and the high schoolers were asked a question like, what parts of your body are infected by nicotine? And then everybody's like, oh, me. So, it's just exciting to sit there and to see how they learn. Even if they don't know the answer, they learn from that. And they like to come to the front and be seen.
That's amazing. It's always so fun and impactful to see firsthand how we're impacting youth. And in that scenario, seeing the middle schoolers look up to their high school peers and get the benefit of that peer-to-peer advising is amazing. And that's also all part of Orange Partnership Community Coalition. So thank you for sharing that. What would you say, you may have already covered a little bit, but what value does Orange Partnership bring to the community, do you feel?
Well, we have mental health organizations, not enough of them. We have all other different types of organizations, but when it comes to vaping and when it comes to nicotine and tobacco, there's not enough organizations to deal with those types of items, particularly on the preventive nature. And when it comes to tobacco, for the Orange County Health Department, we have an expert, which is Rita, but we can't clone Rita. We need to have maybe 5 or 6 Ritas that go this way, this way, this way, this way. So it's up to organizations that are part of Orange Partnership to help with that process.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Keith. And I just want to say it's been truly special to have 2 of the top leaders from Orange Partnership on the podcast today. The community needs to know the priority that we make for the youth in our community and helping them thrive. So thank you for spending your time listening to our podcast today with the leadership at Orange Partnership. To learn more about our coalition and the work we do, visit our website at www.orangepartnership.org.